Over the last few weeks, we've watched something pretty interesting happen. Self described democratic socialists have been winning primary elections around our country. And a lot of these victories have been tied to the momentum created by Zohran Mamdani in New York City. Suddenly, the political establishment is acting like the sky is falling. Conservatives are panicking, liberals are panicking, even a lot of libertarians are panicking. But here's my question. Are they panicking for the right reasons? Because if all you're doing is reposting the craziest quotes from socialist candidates and hoping people will be scared away, I think you're missing what's actually going on. See, I don't think this is mainly an ideological movement. Most people aren't sitting around reading Karl Marx or Ludwig von Mises. Let's be honest with ourselves. Instead, most people are politically responding to something much simpler. They believe the system is rigged. And honestly, they're not entirely wrong about that. Now, here's where I think the conversation goes off the rails. About a century ago, economists had what became known as the socialist calculation debate. On one side were Austrian economists like Ludwig von Mises and F.A. Hayek. On the other were socialist thinkers who believed central planning could replace markets. Mises made an argument that to this day has never really been answered. He explained that without genuine market prices, economic calculation becomes impossible. Not difficult, impossible. Think about it this way. Suppose you want to build a bridge. Should you build it out of steel or platinum? We laugh because we already know platinum costs dramatically more than steel. But how do we know that? Prices. Market prices tell us which resources are scarce, which are abundant, and where they create the most value. Now, multiply that decision by millions. Should the bridge even exist? Should it be a tunnel, a railroad? Should those resources build hospitals instead, or factories, or houses? No planner, no committee, no bureaucracy, no supercomputer, not even artificial intelligence can answer those questions without the information generated by voluntary exchange and profit and loss signals. That's the genius of the free market. It isn't chaos. It's decentralized coordination. And despite all the technological advances we've seen over the last 100 years, nobody has actually solved Mises's original problem. Sure, people argue that AI will someday make central planning work, but computers still can't generate genuine market prices when markets themselves have been replaced by political commands. They're still trying to solve the wrong problem. So here's the real puzzle. If socialism lost the economic argument decades ago, chiefly the calculation problem, why does this idea of socialism keep coming back? Well, because politics often isn't about discovering the truth. More often, it's about acquiring power. Government officials don't operate under the same profit and loss discipline as entrepreneurs. If a private business wastes resources, it goes bankrupt. If government wastes resources, it usually asks for and receives a bigger budget. Now that changes incentives. Instead of asking, how do we create wealth? Politicians often ask, how do we control wealth? Those are two completely different questions. Economist Frederick Bastiat once described government as, quote, the great fiction through which everyone endeavors to live at the expense of everybody else, end quote. That's one of those quotes that stings because, well, it still feels relevant. Throughout history, regardless of whether we're talking about monarchies, socialist states, or modern democracies, political systems have often developed powerful coalitions between government officials and well-connected interests. The slogans change, the campaign speeches change, The economic theories change. But too often, the result looks remarkably familiar. Wealth flows towards those with political influence rather than those who create value in the marketplace. And here's where I think many voters become understandably frustrated. They look around and see politically connected corporations receiving favors, subsidies, bailouts, special regulations, or lobbying advantages. They're told that this is quote unquote capitalism. So naturally, they conclude that if this is capitalism, maybe socialism is the alternative. But that's a bad idea, and that's a false choice. What people, whether they know it or not, are actually reacting against aren't free markets. What they're actually reacting against is political privilege. It's interventionism. It's cronyism. It's an economy where success increasingly depends on connections instead of merit and competition. And when enough people recognize that wealth is constantly being redistributed toward politically connected elites, many people understandably decide, well, maybe government should redistribute it towards us instead. And I get why that sounds appealing. The problem is that this notion misunderstands what political power tends to do. Expanding the same machinery that already concentrates wealth and influence doesn't necessarily eliminate those incentives. It often expands them, unfortunately. And that's why I think these new socialist movements aren't really offering an escape from the interventionist system we already have. In fact, they're just offering a different and perhaps even more oppressive and worse version of it. They're offering more planning, more centralized control, more political allocation of resources, more dependence on government decision makers instead of voluntary cooperation. History suggests that that road doesn't lead to greater prosperity. It leads to more distortions, more favoritism, and eventually, even greater demands for intervention to fix the problems created by previous interventions. So maybe the real debate today isn't capitalism versus socialism at all. Maybe it's whether we trust free individuals making voluntary decisions or whether we continue placing more trust and authority in institutions that repeatedly demonstrate they cannot allocate resources as effectively as millions of people acting through free markets. That's what I think deserves our attention. Because if we spend all our time mocking socialism without conversely explaining why free markets are the better alternative and actually work, or without at least acknowledging why so many people have lost faith in the current system, we're going to keep missing the point. And if we want a freer, more prosperous society, we have to do more than criticize bad ideas. We have to explain why the good ideas, like free market capitalism, are actually good. We have to show people that genuine free markets aren't the system that they're angry about. We have to show them instead that free markets are the alternative they've rarely been allowed to experience.